The United Nations World Heritage Committee voted Wednesday to approve a resolution ignoring Jewish ties to the Temple Mount in Jerusalem's Old City. The vote mirrored last week's resolution by UNESCO's Executive Committee declaring the Temple Mount and Western Wall Islamic. That move was an attempt to sever the historical Jewish connection to the sites and label Israel as an occupying power. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu blasted the new vote. He said, quote, "Radical Islamic forces destroy mosques, churches, and archaeological sites, while Israel is the only state in the region that preserves them and allows freedom of worship for all religions." He continued, UNESCO's World Heritage Committee deserves to be condemned.
Many Muslims in Germany say they feel under threat after a rise in the number of attacks on their places of worship. And while there were nearly 100 attacks on mosques last year, Muslim leaders are calling on the government to offer them greater protection as Islamophobia grows in the country. Ali Mustafa has this report from Berlin.
Muslim places of worship are under attack in Germany in a sign of rising hostility towards migrants. Bombs were thrown at this mosque in Dresden last month in what police say was a xenophobic attack. No one has claimed responsibility and there have been no arrests.
German police and politicians did not care enough to stop such attacks in the beginning. These assaults have risen as a result of their ignorance.
In 2009, 2 mosques were vandalized in Germany. 6 years later, that number had jumped to almost 100. One of the worst attacks happened at the Mevlana Mosque in Berlin in 2014. Parts of the mosque were set on fire in an arson attack.
2 years after it was damaged in that arson attack, the facade of this mosque is still being repaired. And worshippers who visit this mosque regularly say they are afraid of rising xenophobia in Germany.
Murad Gul, who heads the Islamic Federation of Berlin, says things haven't been easy.
The refugee camp known as the Jungle is on the outskirts of the city of Calais, France, just across the English Channel from the United Kingdom. Residents hail from lands as far away as Sudan, Syria, Iraq, and Afghanistan. They struggle this far in the hopes of reaching the UK, often dangerously, through the Channel Tunnel. Conditions are rough. Many live in shipping containers. Clean water and food are often hard to come by. The camp has become known for crime and clashes with police. Its population has risen quickly this year, putting pressure on the French government to respond. Solid figures on the population of the unofficial refugee camp are hard to come by, given its shifting nature. But local government officials and British charity Help Refugees have been tracking them as best as they can. A major area of concern is unaccompanied minors. Help Refugees reported the disappearance of 129 unaccompanied minors last spring. Charities monitoring the camp fear the children may have fallen victim to human trafficking. The most recent estimates on the number of unaccompanied minors range from 12 to 1,300. The UK has begun to accept minors, but efforts have been slow to take off. Another British charity, Citizens UK, has brought 60 children from Calais and connected them with relatives in Britain. The jungle dates back to before the current migration crisis. Its demolition may be imminent, but that does not mean the camp won't rise again.
Violence has broken out at the giant jungle migrant camp in the French town of Calais, with the camp's demolition planned for today. The site, now home to up to 10,000 migrants, has been taking in up to 80 new refugees a day. Around 1,500 live in relatively good condition in new containers. However, many others are still stuck in makeshift tents and shacks. RT's Harry Fear reports.
Last night there was violence as has become the norm here beside the infamous jungle camp. Some of the migrants throwing projectiles, stones and bottles at police, who then responded in kind, of course, with tear gas. So this is meant to be D-Day for the slum-like camp. These are meant to be its final hours, and thousands of officers have been drafted in to deal with this clearance operation that authorities are calling a humanitarian operation. At least several thousand, if not 10,000, some estimate, is now the total population of the camp. So what to do with such a number of people when the camp is cleared? Well, President Hollande has a plan.
We intend to dismantle the Calais camp entirely and relocate people throughout France to small centres with 40 to 60 people staying for a limited period of 3 or 4 months. This will happen in full coordination with the migrants.
So the plan then, as you heard there, to relocate those migrants, dispersing them in refugee centres around France, offering them the chance to claim asylum. If they don't take it, they will be deported. And that is those that accept to board. There's something like 60 coaches that will take them from the camp to these centres around France. But not everyone is thrilled by this idea, and there have already been local protests around France by those angry residents. Really, their message has been, not in my backyard.
We are against the choice of the place for security reasons.
The problem is not to distribute migrants across the country. The problem is that French people don't want them anymore. The French don't want immigration. This is a reality.
What will migrants do here? They don't learn French, we don't teach them the values of the Republic, and even on the health side, we're not able to treat them correctly.
During a demonstration that gathered about 300 people at a construction site in North Dakota and prompted law enforcement officers to use pepper spray, more than 80 people protesting the Dakota Access Pipeline were arrested Saturday. Morton County Sheriff Office spokesperson Rob Keller said authorities were called at 5:20 a.m. Saturday to a pipeline construction site located about 5 miles from an area where protesters have been camping out for weeks. The confrontation between officers and protesters lasted 5 hours. CBS affiliate KXMB reports that around 7:30 in the morning, about 300 more protesters walked 3 miles into private property near the pipeline west of Highway 1806. A group of protesters then attempted to breach the police line. According to Morton County officials, that was when they used pepper spray on the protesters.
Cross-border firing turns deadly in Kashmir as India and Pakistan say a soldier and 3 civilians were killed in an exchange that both countries blamed on their rival neighbor. The shooting started overnight and went into the morning of Monday, October 24th. India said it was retaliating against what it called a, quote, unprovoked and blatant ceasefire violation. It said a soldier and a 6-year-old boy were killed in the exchange. Pakistan accused India of unprovoked firing and said it lost a villager and an 18-month-old child. Tensions in the disputed region have soared in recent months, especially after a deadly attack on an Indian Army base on September 18th that India blamed on Pakistan. Pakistan denies any involvement. Later in September, India claimed it launched surgical strikes across the de facto border, which Pakistan also said was untrue.
Heavily armed attackers wearing suicide vests stormed a Pakistani police academy on Monday night in the southwestern city of Quetta. Government officials said at least 59 people were killed and 117 others were wounded. 5 to 6 gunmen raided a dormitory where some 200 trainees were resting and sleeping. Some were also taken hostage. An operation to clear the facility lasted 5 hours. No group has claimed responsibility for the attack.
And now Saudi jets have intensified their airstrikes on Yemen with the end of a 3-day UN-backed ceasefire. The deadliest air raids targeted the Baqim district of Sada province. Saudi warplanes used internationally banned cluster bombs in their attack, leaving 6 civilians dead. Strikes also targeted Nim district in Sada province and a water storage facility in Hudaydah. Yemeni army and allied forces have launched attacks on Saudi bases in retaliation for Riyadh's onslaught. Ansarullah also targeted Najran province with 2 ballistic missiles. Meanwhile, the UN envoy for Yemen is in the capital Sana'a to push for a new ceasefire. The cessation of hostilities began on 2100 GMT Wednesday to allow aid deliveries in Yemen and ended officially at midnight Saturday. Despite that ceasefire, fierce gun battles raged between the Yemeni army and Saudi-backed forces. Riyadh has continued its airstrikes throughout Yemen. Saudi aggression began in Yemen back in March of 2015, and to date it's left well over 10,000 people dead, mostly Yemeni civilians.
Malnutrition rates among some Yemeni children under the age of 5 are as high as 31%. That is more than double the global emergency threshold of 15%. Almost half of the children throughout Yemen have not grown properly. The WFP says it needs to reach the most impoverished provinces of Marib, Jouf, and Taiz.
What we're looking for is an increase in support from the international community to make sure that WFP gets access to the entire country, but also to have the means to reach to those people and to provide them with the food.
The World Food Programme also pointed out that the Saudi war in Yemen is taking a devastating toll on the most vulnerable citizens, including children and women. Saudi Arabia began its offensive against its southern neighbor in 2015 and has imposed a total blockade on the Arab country ever since. It is estimated that over 10,100 people have lost their lives in the Saudi onslaught.
المشكلة في سوء التغذية بسبب الحالة المادية والأوضاع الحالية الموجودة في هذا الوقت. كان ولا بها شيء تمشي صحة جيدة ولا بها شيء يا صرك هالمرض وهي تمشي.
Venezuela's opposition majority legislature has declared that President Nicolas Maduro's government had committed a coup. Opposition lawmakers say he blocked a referendum on removing him from power and are pressing to put him on trial. This came during an emergency session on Sunday to resolve the economic and political crisis gripping the nation, which was sent into brief chaos as supporters of Maduro stormed the premises.
To say there's tension between Russia and the US is an understatement. Apparently, Russia isn't taking any chances. It has been preparing for nuclear war situations. The Wall Street Journal even reported Tuesday, at the Kremlin's Ministry of Emergency Situations, the Cold War is back. The paper said Russia conducted its largest round of disaster preparation drills since the collapse of the Soviet Union. According to the Russian Emergency Situations Ministry, over 40 million people participated in the 4 days of drills. The drills included setting up biological, chemical, and radiation monitoring centers, as well as running through how to protect people from those types of emergencies. Additionally, the Wall Street Journal reports personnel checked that bomb shelters are still operational and civilian response plans are being improved.
This footage, broadcast by Russian state TV and other channels in early October, shows Russians taking part in 4-day-long emergency and civil defense drills across the country. Some 40 million people ultimately participated in what was the biggest test run of its kind since the fall of the USSR.
А вот куда бежать в случае бомбежки, половина не знает.
The drills were designed to train people how to survive in the event of a nuclear attack or other disasters.
Обязанность любого государства – обеспечение безопасности населения, защита граждан.
The Emergencies Ministry said it was preparing bomb shelters throughout Moscow that would accommodate the entire population of the capital.
Осматривают все подземные помещения, они подойдут, чтобы переждать налеты.
Videos of emergency workers in gas masks and preparatory tests for bomb shelters were prominently aired, and commentators on state TV could be heard making anti-American statements.
России надоело высокомерное американское вранье. Уже известного достаточно, чтобы почувствовать новую атмосферу ожесточенности.
Observers say the Kremlin's underlying goal of this kind of saber rattling is to reinforce Russia's stature as a nuclear superpower on par with the U.S.
America is already technically at war with Russia. Well, now we are hearing that same warning coming from a top British general warning of nuclear war with Russia, saying the end of life could be as we know it upon us. This is senior British Army officer General Sir Richard Sheriff, and he warns that NATO faces nuclear war with Russia in Europe, and that America is already technically at war with Russia, of course, now just as echoing these cyber war hearings that we're talking about. So he asserts that the West faces the biggest threat from Russia since the Cold War, and that Putin plans to reestablish Russia's status as one of the world's greatest powers by marching into the Baltic states of Latvia, Lithuania, and Estonia. He's also comparing the way the West policies toward Putin to the appeasement of Hitler. He says Moscow may have already lit the fuse that could lead to the unthinkable nuclear war with Russia in Europe. And as we all know, under Article 5 of the Washington Treaty, an attack on one NATO member country represents an attack on all member countries, meaning the United States would be at war with Russia if Russian troops set foot in Baltic countries.
The Memory of Mankind project aims to make sure we don't lose all the knowledge we've accumulated in the event of a disaster by packing it all up and storing it in a salt mine. As technology advances, the data might not always be brought along. Memory of Mankind is creating hard copy records of mankind's achievements on what it calls ceramic microfilm. The flat ceramic plates are covered with a dark coating, then laser etched with information. There are two different densities used. The simpler one holds 5 million characters, the same as a 400-page book. You need 10 times magnification to read them. The more advanced version can have color images and diagrams along with 50,000 characters of text. The plates include history, science, biographies of notable people, art, and more. The plates are being packaged up in ceramic boxes and hidden in a salt mine in Hallstatt, Austria. The hope is that people living in a post-apocalyptic future could use these clues to uncover the Memory of Mankind vault and jumpstart civilization again.
They came from Asia and from the Pacific Ocean.
During the Feast of Tabernacles, thousands of Christians come from all over the world to celebrate the Feast of Tabernacles, like these Christians from mainland China.
They came to support Israel.
We love Israel. We stand with Israel, and we want to be here. Every year we make it a point to be here, and we bring in people to show that there are friends for Israel.
Israel has been a close ally of Singapore since the beginning, and we owe Israel so much. They've helped us when we were nothing. Israel is the one who helped us. It is my honor to be here to support Israel on behalf of my country.
When many nations are turning against Israel, this support is a morale boost for Israelis like this tour guide.
I'm excited working with pilgrims that love Israel and come here with all the problems that they have in their country, not acknowledging the state of Israel, but yet coming here and supporting us.
Many believe this feast is prophetic.
The prophet Zechariah said one day all the nations would come and to worship the Lord and to keep the Feast of Tabernacles in Jerusalem. You're not only remembering God's provision in the wilderness at this feast, but you're looking forward to the Messianic kingdom. We believe this is the feast of the birthing of the Messianic kingdom when the Lord arrives to take up the throne of David in Jerusalem.
The United Nations World Heritage Committee voted Wednesday to approve a resolution ignoring Jewish ties to the Temple Mount in Jerusalem's Old City. The vote mirrored last week's resolution by UNESCO's Executive Committee declaring the Temple Mount and Western Wall Islamic. That move was an attempt to sever the historical Jewish connection to the sites and label Israel as an occupying power. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu blasted the new vote. He said, quote, radical Islamic forces destroy mosques, churches, and archaeological sites, while Israel is the only state in the region that preserves them and allows freedom of worship for all religions. He continued, UNESCO's World Heritage Committee deserves to be condemned.
Many Muslims in Germany say they feel under threat after a rise in the number of attacks on their places of worship. And while there were nearly 100 attacks on mosques last year, Muslim leaders are calling on the government to offer them greater protection as Islamophobia grows in the country. Ali Mustafa has this report from Berlin.
Later, that number had jumped to almost 100. One of the worst attacks happened at the Mevlana Mosque in Berlin in 2014. Parts of the mosque were set on fire in an arson attack.
2 years after it was damaged in that arson attack, the facade of this mosque is still being repaired. And worshippers who visit this mosque regularly say they are afraid of rising xenophobia in Germany.
Murad Gul, who heads the Islamic Federation of Berlin, says things haven't been easy. Muslim places of worship are under attack in Germany, in a sign of rising hostility towards migrants. Bombs were thrown at this mosque in Dresden last month in what police say was a xenophobic attack. No one has claimed responsibility and there have been no arrests.
German police and politicians did not care enough to stop such attacks in the beginning. These assaults have risen as a result of their ignorance.
In 2009, 2 mosques were vandalized in Germany. 6 years.
The refugee camp known as the Jungle is on the outskirts of the city of Calais, France, just across the English Channel from the United Kingdom. Residents hail from lands as far away as Sudan, Syria, Iraq, and Afghanistan. They struggle this far in the hopes of reaching the UK, often dangerously, through the Channel Tunnel. Conditions are rough. Many live in shipping containers. Clean water and food are often hard to come by. The camp has become known for crime and clashes with police. Its population has risen quickly this year, putting pressure on the